In today's video, I talked to Enno about Roon Labs, and he talked about a trial. To get access to the trial, you will sign up for their 15 or 14-day trial. If you choose to sign up, what you'll get is a free month added on to your subscription. Tidal also has a deal still going on for 2 or 3 months for $2. If you want to try out Roon, and you want to try out Tidal, you can do it for next to nothing. If you do choose to sign up with Roon, you'll get an extra 30 days tacked on to your subscription. So check out the video and give it a try because it's pretty awesome. Hey, I'm Randy, and you're watching The Cheap Audio Man. Today is very exciting. We have Enno from Roon, and I am a big fan of Roon, but I wanted to have you on to really talk to the audience, and because for the longest time, I didn't get Roon. Like, I didn't understand it. Like, I kind of understood that it exists, but I didn't understand like how it can benefit me. So welcome, Enno, and tell us a little bit about Roon.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I hope I can sort of demystify some of what Roon is for everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll start by saying that really what Roon started off as it started off to try to be two things. The first of them was a way to kind of browse music. That could be your own library, so the CDs you've ripped or the files you've downloaded or whatever that might be. But then also to discover streaming music, and to do that in a way that's kind of respects the needs of music fans. You know, we think of ourselves sort of music nerds, right? People the kind of listener who reads the liner notes to the record and that kind of thing. That's really, that's what Roon set out to do. Because what we saw was, as people started shifting from, you know, CDs and vinyl to digital, that most of the playback experiences that you find don't really give you a way to get any of that additional information to figure out who produced something or who played on it or what the lyrics were, that sort of thing. So Roon's designed to be that first and foremost, a way to browse and play music that lets you see all that extra information about the music. And the other side of it is that when you're playing back music, you know, we started off working on a PC or Mac, you know, it was a computer app to start with. Where does the sound come out, right? Do you want to be limited to your laptop speakers? Well, that obviously doesn't make sense. If you're a music fan, you're probably also an audiophile to some extent.
Right.
So you, at a minimum, you care about sound, you care about how the music's going to sound. So the other thing that we did was really create this sort of audio plumbing that allows Roon to work with
audio plumbing
gear.
I like that. Yeah. Audio plumbing.
The idea is so that it would work with the gear that you already have, and that going forward we'd form, you know, partnerships with audio manufacturers, so that their gear works with Roon out of the box. And that's definitely happened over the last 5 years or so.
Yeah.
So that's it in a nutshell. It's a piece of software that lets you browse music and explore music and listen to it on basically any of the gear you might have in the house.
Yeah. Now, when I first started out with Roon, I actually loaded, and you call it the core, right?
Yes.
The Roon core. And I was kind of under the impression, oh my goodness, I'm going to have a dedicated box. But you don't, right? You can just load it up on any computer, and that can be your core initially.
Absolutely. I think the way most people end up starting with Roon is actually really simple. They just download the Roon app, put it on their laptop, and kind of mess around and get a feel for what it does. And Roon works that way. It works just fine. What we find a lot of people do is they set it up that way, and then over time, well, you know, if the laptop goes to sleep, now Roon isn't available elsewhere in the house. So they end up saying, okay, maybe I'm going to do something a little bit more exotic. I'm going to install Roon on a NAS or on an Intel NUC, on a little mini PC, so that it can be in the closet and be always on. But you don't have to start there by any means. In fact, the simplest way is just to download the app, put it on your computer, and run it, and you're off to the races.
Yeah, that's and I have one of the little NUCs, and then I have it on running all the time. So what's your favorite music? What do you like to listen to?
My background was originally classical, and then I went to Berkeley. I went to music school, Berkeley College of Music in Boston, which is very, very heavily jazz focused.
Okay.
So I went from classical to jazz, and then you know, electronic music. I mean, you can see from all my crazy you know, synthesizers and whatever else. I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
is the answer.
You got any favorite bands you want to talk about? Maybe some stuff that people don't know. Why don't you help them discover more music right now instead of
Well,
having
actually, we should come back to that because there's something I want to talk about that Roon does. It's kind of interesting. That's
Okay.
maybe better than me making a recommendation. We'll come back to that.
Okay. Okay. So at what point were you like, I want to do this? Do you have a background in software, or was it just something that you got together with a bunch of guys and said, hey, let's do this?
I did some software work early in my career, but really it was around. I can't believe this. It's over 20 years ago now that I met this guy named Danny Dulai, who's he's a serious software developer, unlike myself. I dabbled, but he was the real thing.
Right.
And I met him probably in 1998, 99. He was working on some software to let him play music around his house, just for fun. And he and I sat down and kind of compared notes about what we might want this thing to be, and we kind of cobbled something together for our own use, just for fun. And then a few years into that, we thought, well, actually, maybe we should start a company and do this for real. So it started off very much as a labor of love, and I think that shows in the product.
Yeah, for sure.
So then the first product we made was this is 2004. We made a hardware media server because back in those days there were no smartphones, no tablets, nobody had a NAS. There were no streaming services yet. So we made a system that was it had a touch screen and you'd rip your CDs into it.
Oh, cool.
And then over time, obviously, that kind of evolved into what Roon has become now, which is all software.
Very cool. So for folks that are maybe on Tidal or Cobas and they have their own algorithm and kind of suggestions, how does Roon differ from? And I know I've talked to some other folks before, and I know that you have an AI engine, and how does that differ from some of the other streaming services?
There's the technology that's out there, the machine learning technology. We didn't invent any of it. We like to think that the way we've kind of brought it to bear on the problem of recommending music is pretty unique. The way we've done that is, for starters, most Roon users have some number of files, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not just streaming only. So they've got a hard drive full of the music that they ripped or whatever it is. So we can kind of use that as a fingerprint of their taste, which is, as you imagine, if you log on to Tidal for the first time or Cobos for the first time, they don't have that benefit. They don't know anything about you yet.
Right.
So we have that little bit of a head start where we can look at the files that you've collected and we can form some kind of understanding of your musical tastes. And so that's kind of the foundational level. The next thing that we have, the edge that we have, is because of who Roon is made for. The people that use Roon are really, really into music, and they're very, very nerdy about it. And, they really kind of they plumb the depths of the subgenres that they love in a really, really detailed way. So the listening data, which we use to train our machine learning models, have really, really interesting information. We don't have a lot of people who just listen to the top 40 and that's the end of it, right? You have, so our training data is outstanding. And what the result of that is that when you use this amazing training data, that the recommendations that we're able to create end up feeling more human. They're more they're tuned in a little bit better just because we have better data to start with.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our advantage there. And this is the point of that I was going to, going back to asking me for a recommendation earlier. The idea is that Roon will make recommendations that are extremely sensitive to what's in your library, what you've played, what you have skipped and decided not to play. All that stuff is taken into account, and then also kind of matched with what other people out in the world are listening to. So it's a very sort of music centric or a very kind of sensitive approach. You won't end up getting a recommendation that feels really out of whack with your tastes.
Good. Sorry, I said artificial intelligence. I know Skynet's not in charge of Roon, so machine learning. So one of the things that I got into, and I know I would say this would be, we're talking about Roon 101 right now. This would probably be Roon 401, with some of the DSP capabilities within Roon. And I found that to be very fascinating. Is there, a couple that you want to just kind of touch on that most people maybe get a benefit from?
Absolutely. I mean, DSP is very interesting, or rather, the way people use DSP is very interesting. My background, my first job out of college was at a recording studio, so I have a very sort of pragmatic pro audio view of these kinds of features. But what we see is that some people say, you know, they're on the purest end of the spectrum, like, do not touch my bits. I want exactly what's in that stream or in that file. I want that all the way to the endpoint, and I don't want it stepped on at all. Other people go the other way and say, you know, I have an opportunity to tweak the signal before it comes out of my speakers. I can arguably do more good to the sound using a bit of EQ or room correction or what have you than I can by upgrading my hardware. So it takes all kinds. It's, you know, there's no one solution for everyone, but I think the ones that are notable, to me, EQ is very low hanging fruit, and it's hard not to be able to improve the sound of a system with a little bit of sort of sensitive use of EQ, if that's your thing.
Right.
The other ones that are, I think, get a lot of attention are room correction, which is still a little bit of a dark art to most people, both in terms of how to do the measurements and how to implement it correctly. We've tried to make it fairly simple. So room correction is another one. There's a couple of specific, one specific to headphones, the crossfeed, the idea of kind of, you know, mixing the channels slightly for use in headphones. But we try to give kind of, oh, and then there's actually another one I should mention is upsampling. So depending on what DAC you're using downstream, you may want to let Roon do your upsampling to DSD or to a higher rate, whatever, and pass that down to the DAC. The fun part of DSP to me is that you can combine all this stuff all day long. There are a million combinations to use these various DSP algorithms in. So there's a lot of experimentation that you can do there without changing out all your hardware.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. So if you're only, let's say you don't have any CDs, you don't have any FLAC files anywhere, is Roon still worth it? And I mean, that's a loaded question. Of course, it's still worth it. You're the Roon guy, but for someone that's just streaming, you know, why would it be beneficial to use Roon or to check it out at least?
There's a couple of things, I think. The most obvious one is that when you go to an album on Tidal or Qobuz, for example, and you look at that album in Roon, you see something different than you'll see in the Tidal app or the Qobuz app, because all the information about the album has been added by Roon. So you'll see the credits and the, you know, production credits, musician credits, composition, all that stuff. The release date, the original recording dates, all that extra information only exists inside of Roon. You don't get that the other way. So if the information thing is interesting to you, that's the most visible and obvious way that the Roon experience is just totally different. The other one comes from kind of the way the product is architected. We started off with the sensibilities of the collector in mind. So in Roon, there's this notion of my library. Now, in the traditional sense, you might think, well, that's CDs that I owned and that I ripped into my system. But in Roon, it doesn't work that way. You could go to an album on Tidal and add it to your library. Now, of course, you don't own anything physical in that case, but if you're a music nerd like me, the idea of knowing that you've got, you know, such and such, these albums by such and such an artist is important, and I have them in a way that I can get to them easily, and they're differentiated from everything else out there. Because one of the challenges that has emerged, I mean, I would say, you know, 10, 15 years ago, we would have said, if you had access to all the music in the world streaming, can you imagine how great that would be? And back then, we thought that would be mind-blowing.
Right.
The reality of it is that every streaming service has 60, 80 million tracks now. And that's a daunting user experience. Where do I start? Right. You know, like, where's my happy place in that 60 million tracks? Where am I going to get started? So Roon is really designed to give you that, an opportunity to pull your favorite stuff together and then to make recommendations based on that, so you can explore outside your kind of, you know, your safe bubble of things you know well.
Yeah.
Those are experiences that are hard to have in streaming services. So I think those are probably the two biggest areas of focus.
And I know when I first started, so I have a lot of devices here. And one of the things that always confused me a little bit was the difference between Roon tested and Roon ready. And I know there's a lot of hardware out there that may say either or. So can you take maybe the viewer through what the difference is on those?
Absolutely. let me just deal with the architecture quickly at a high level. You mentioned earlier the Roon core. The idea of the Roon core, it can be a piece of software that's running on your PC. It could be a dedicated appliance that you have in the closet, whatever. It's sort of the brains of the operation in your home. It's where Roon keeps its database. It's where all the heavy lifting happens. It's where the audio playback happens. And you can control that Roon core with apps on your phone, on your tablet, on your PC, whatever. All those apps can control the core. The core then plays audio out to audio devices around your house. And these come in a couple of different flavors. The first one is what we call Roon Ready. And these devices that are called Roon Ready actually have Roon software like baked into them. We've worked with the manufacturer. They're network players. This is an important distinction between Roon Ready and everything else. Roon Ready devices, you connect them to your network, either your Wi-Fi or your Ethernet, and the Roon core talks to them over a network. That's probably it's the tightest kind of integration that you can get with Roon, in the sense that Roon can discover that device, stream high resolution to it. It can control it both ways. So you turn the volume knob on your, Roon Ready integrated player, you'll see the volume slider in the Roon app move along with it. It's very, very tightly kind of integrated end to end. So, and all those devices are certified by our test team. So we work very, very closely with the manufacturers to make the Roon Ready devices.
Yeah.
Beyond that, there's a whole bunch of other ways that Roon can work with a piece of hardware. It can connect via USB or HDMI. It's actually like a wired connection, or it can, over a network, it could use AirPlay, Chromecast, Squeezebox, the Sonos protocol. Those are all other ways. But in those cases, we haven't worked with the manufacturer to implement that integration, but we have tested it. So we call those devices Roon tested, which means you can be confident that you plug it in, Roon's going to know exactly what to do with that thing. One of the aspects of that testing program is that we want the experience to be sort of, you plug in your device, Roon detects it, and Roon automatically configures itself to work best with that device. So for example, let's say, I'm going to make up something here that's maybe a little bit far-fetched. Let's say you have a DAC with that has a maximum sample rate of 96 kilohertz, 24-bit, and it can't do any higher. Roon will know that. If it's Roon tested, Roon will know that. It will never try to send it 192, or whatever it is. It always optimizes its playback with that device based on the device's capabilities. And we know what those capabilities are because we've got the device in our lab, we've tested it, it's all figured out in advance.
Very cool. So I've got two questions. One is, there's a ton of streaming services out there. Is Roon, in talks or maybe looking to integrate other streaming services beyond Tidal and Qobuz?
Absolutely. Really our focus has been on the high-res streaming services, obviously. So when we launched, Tidal was the only service around that did even CD quality back then. So obviously that's why we started with Tidal. Then Qobuz came along, we did that integration. We're less interested in doing integrations with mass market streaming services that have lossy content, because it just doesn't make sense for our audience. Our users want high quality audio. So our emphasis really is there, working with services that have done that. So obviously Amazon Music HD has gone in that direction. Apple Music is going lossless, or some kind of high res. So those are possibilities in the future. I think really our focus for now has been to find other lossless services that give us reach into other markets where Tidal or Qobuz aren't available. So in Korea, for example, things like that. There are lossless streaming or high-res streaming services popping up all over the place. Over time, in a perfect world, I think we'd integrate with every streaming service. That would be ideal. But in terms of what we can practically do and what we prioritize, it's all about the high-res services to begin with.
And I think it's exciting. Tidal just changed their pricing structure, and they have a hi-fi edition, which is $9.99. So I think the sticker shock is starting to come down on Tidal. Speaking of pricing, I know when I first got interested in Roon, the only way that I could sign up was through an annual membership. And I know that's in the past few months that's changed. So you now have a monthly membership, right?
We do. And I think, yeah, I think for a lot of people, the idea of shelling out for a full year subscription was maybe a little bit daunting. Maybe they weren't entirely convinced that it was the right thing for them. And what we find is kind of what we hoped when we introduced the monthly billing, which is that people try it monthly for a while, and then they, once they feel confident, once they're convinced, then they upgrade and they get a better deal on the annual, of course. So yeah, we're just trying to give people more options as we go.
Yeah.
I think when we started, it was a little bit, people were a little shocked that, here's a player that doesn't come with music that, is at this price point, $119 a year. But now I think there are more choices, and there are more ways to trial it now, I think. And I think people are getting more comfortable with that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I love, because I grew up in the 80s and 90s, that's really when I, got into music. And so it was the cassettes, unfolding it, out to here and reading everything, and then the CDs and everything. So one of the things I love, and I love vinyl as well. So I love interacting with it, holding it, touching it, and feeling it. And with streamers, I mean, to your point, the convenience level is off the charts, but I feel like sometimes there's something lost in the usability of the streamer. One of the things I love are streamers that have displays. And I just learned this about Roon, is you can actually configure an iPad or something to be a display, or you can just type in an IP address or a web address into a browser, and it will display it on anything. Can you talk more about that? Because that, to me, like, I don't know why. I like to see that out. Like, if Rob Zombie comes on, I want to see Rob Zombie on screen. I just get a huge kick out of that.
I could not agree with you more. I feel like this is one, I don't mind picking music on a phone, but I don't like looking at my phone all the time, especially if I'm listening. So
yeah,
this, we kind of long wanted to do this feature. We ended up implementing it with Chromecast. So most smart TVs these days have some kind of cast functionality built in. That's how I use it in my living room. So whatever's playing up on the big TV, you'll see, the cover art, the artist photo, or the lyrics, or whatever it is you want up there. I like being able to sit on the sofa without my phone and just glance up and be like, hey, what is this thing that what is this that I'm hearing? That kind of thing. So yeah, it works via cast. And it also works, like you said, on any device with a web browser. So I just like to be able to glance across the room and to get some confirmation of what it is I'm hearing.
Yeah. Well, I got a big kick out of that. And I was playing, I have a tendency to, I mean, the cool thing about this job is I love it, right? So I'd be doing this anyway, but now it's fun. So I'll be up late at night. I'll be, they can do this, they can do this. So it was about 12:30 at night, and I'm typing in, I went into Roon and I'm figuring it out, and I'm on my phone, and then I'm switching tracks and it's showing up on my laptop, and I got a big kick out of that. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, it's fun. The idea, one of the things is, to me, listening is kind of a social experience. I mean, sometimes you do it on your own, but sometimes when you're doing it with other members of your household, like for me, the idea that everyone can have the app and we can all be contributing to a queue of music that's playing in the living room or in the kitchen or whatever. To me, that's part of the fun too, is that it's not this, like, it's an app on a computer that only one person can use and you got to control it and whatever else. Like, everyone can kind of join in. Or if you're having people over, you just say, just grab the Roon app, sign into my core, and you can pick some tracks and throw them into the playlist, for example.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you'd like the viewers to know that I haven't touched on? One thing I will say though is, so when I first started looking into Roon, I looked at the core, I looked at the nucleus, and I looked at some of the streamers, Blue Sound Node or whatever is $500. And I kind of dismissed it because of the upfront cost just for the hardware, in addition to the software. But the more that I got into it, and the more that I got into, the channel, I started to learn I can use a Raspberry Pi and put, RoPie-E on the Raspberry Pi. And for less than $100, I've got a perfect, Roon endpoint. And so And then what's the little Intel device?
The Nook.
The Nook, and
Yeah.
things like that. And I was able to put together a very capable Roon system, and it wasn't a huge amount of money up front.
This is a big part of our strategy that I think has confused a lot of people because, yeah, the Nucleus is a premium piece of hardware. It's designed to go into a real kind of audiophile system. It's designed to be completely turnkey. You don't have to do anything. Like you plug it in, you turn it on, that's it. All the work's been done for you. And what we find is that among music fans and audiophiles, people separate kind of neatly into two camps. You have people who are like, look, I'm busy, I love to listen, but I have 1.4 hours a week to dedicate to this hobby. Just make it work. So, let me buy the box that just turns on and does that thing every single time. And they may have, crazy high-end system or whatever, but convenience is really what they're after. And in some cases, money's no object. I mean, doesn't apply to me, but that's great if it does for you, right?
Right.
And the other camp is way more like, this is I like to experiment. I like to tweak. I want to, which is why we introduced Rock, which is the installer that goes on the Intel Nook. You can buy a Nucleus at a premium price and get the turnkey experience. Or if you're willing to, and you have the technical savvy to be able to run that installer and get your Nook configured that way, you can build it yourself. And I think this is the thing that confused people, in the audio world. People are like, why would you do that? And our answer was like, look, we want to have a solution for everyone. Having a super premium hardware solution doesn't get everyone what they need. We need to create this whole spectrum of products from DIY with the Raspberry Pi. You can get there for, maybe not tens of dollars, but not far off it. As far as an endpoint. Or you could have a $500,000 stereo in your living room, and we want to be able to sort of meet the needs of all those users.
Yeah, well, I think that's great, and I think you're just helping people, and you're not putting a money limit on it. So yes, you can help people find music, and they can buy a premium streamer or a premium Nucleus, or you can help people and they can get a Raspberry Pi. And trust me, I'm not the most technical guy on the planet, and I was able to load up Rock on the Nook and load up RoPie on a Raspberry Pi, and all in, I had an endpoint and a core for less than $400, and
absolutely,
I was rocking and rolling.
I think you've touched on a really interesting theme there, which is that we do try not to be too prescriptive about how you use Roon. We try to, it's not all things to all people, but we try to get as close as we can, in the sense that you can use premium hardware, you can DIY, you can go with DSP or not. You can, there in terms of audio file formats and stream formats, there's all kinds of debate there. Do I want Redbook CD rips, or do I want high-res FLAC, or do I want MQA? Again, we're not prescriptive about any of those things. We support them all, because everyone has their own way of getting there, and everyone has their own preferences. I started off with, I had a huge CD collection when I started with all this stuff. And I found in some cases going high res was something I preferred. In some cases, not so much. I was actually happy with the CD. These are discoveries each of us make. They're very individual decisions.
Sure.
So what we try to do with Roon is to support all those decisions. Buy the gear you want, build the gear you want, choose all your formats, which streaming service you use. We're trying to be as kind of agnostic to all those choices as possible.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, I enjoyed it. And I like Roon. It was somewhat of a non-starter for me initially because of the annual subscription. And when you went to monthly, I'm like, perfect. Now I can try this out. And you have a trial, right? Everybody gets a 30-day trial, right?
It's a 14-day trial. And then after that, it goes, it either goes monthly or annually. And then there is still a lifetime option as well. But I think monthly has made a huge difference to us, just in terms of it gave a lot more people access, which has been great for us.
Did you see, more interest or more
Absolutely.
people signing up with the monthly?
Yeah, a tremendous uptick. Much more than we would have expected, which was great. We did it as a kind of experiment. It was one of the things that, our customer success team said, people are asking, would you be willing to do monthly? And we finally said, okay, let's give it a try. It's been a real help for us.
That's awesome. And I know we
Yep.
talked before we started recording. If folks that are watching this were interested in signing up, you're going to give a little bit more of an extended trial period to
Yeah,
check it
absolutely. We
out.
can do a 60-day trial, and we'll figure out exactly how that's going to work. And I guess you'll post that with
Yeah,
this
I'll put
video.
that in the description, and then also put it in a pinned comment. I'll put a link there. So I
Okay.
I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk to us about this. And I think it's cool because while music has always been, there's always been passion associated with it, there's also large, and I'm not saying large corporations are bad, but there's, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and I'm willing to bet that while there's people that work at those places that are passionate about music, there's not people like you that are working at Apple or Amazon. They're trying to push the envelope, trying to pull in what you want. And that really, Roon, is what you want, what you wish existed, right?
It is. And actually, you bring up a very interesting point. The way I think about it is that, I grew up in the 80s as well. And like when I was growing up, people listened to FM radio.
Right.
And then a subset of people also went to the record store and bought records or tapes or eventually CDs or whatever. But they were a subset. So you had a lot of people listening sort of passively, listening to the radio. And then you had a bunch of people, a smaller number of people that went in and started collecting and really learning more about the music. I think of the major streaming services. I mean, they provide a great service. They've improved background listening dramatically for hundreds of millions of people, but they're less focused on the interests of that minority because, a company like Spotify, their main goal is scale. They want, hundreds of millions of users is how they get to succeed as a business. And we have made a very conscious decision to focus on the needs of the enthusiast because that's what we set out to do. That's the thing that we enjoy getting up for every day. So we're staying focused on those enthusiast needs, which I think that makes us kind of unique, I think.
Yes. Well, I would agree with that. Well, I enjoyed the time. I enjoy Roon. I know I've been using Tidal a lot more, and now that Roon, not now, but they've always integrated with Tidal. It's something that I think everybody should at least check out. And you can get, I think, a couple months of Tidal for a couple of dollars, and with the Roon trial, you can get up to 60 days here. So I think that's 2 months, or at least a month, even if at really no cost to you to check it out. And I would I'd really encourage everybody to check it out and make your own decision, because I've thoroughly enjoyed my time. And you can get as deep into it as you want, or you can just kind of let it do its thing. But it's a powerful tool if someone wants to take a look at it. But yeah, anything to say? You want to?
No, that's it. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really great. I appreciate it.
Well, you bet. Well, everybody, check out the links in the description. You'll be able to find. I'll also put a link to the Tidal deal, if you want to, try that, and link to Qobuz as well. But I don't know if Qobuz is running a deal, but I think Tidal is still running a pretty decent 2-month deal right now. So anyway, I appreciate y'all watching. Check out Roon. Have a good one.
Thank you.